do in a whole week what I'm going to wear for a show. So I thought pink.
Yeah.
So yes,
Pink and
Barry
blue.
and I are pink and blue, boy, girl.
In case
We're,
we didn't figure that out already.
I don't know. Certainly for us, there's not a question, right?
Not at all.
Hi there from Washington State in this cute little place called Polsbo that I'd never heard of, but when I tell people they've heard of it, apparently it's a touristy place. And Barry's still holding down the fort in California. I guess you're having a heat wave, huh?
Yes, we are. Nothing like we're on the East Coast, but we're still getting our own heat wave earlier than usual. So, yeah, not fun, but it's okay.
So this is WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, TV, and podcast #1 Internet Singles Talk Network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine.
We do this even when I'm on vacation because this is so important.
Yes, it is.
So today we're talking about what things men and women say when they want a permanent relationship. What are the top things they say? And Barry said, ooh, another spicy subject.
And also, actually, what I'd like to add into that title, which we haven't actually got physically, but I want to say it as well, is I like to say also the top things men and women do when they want a permanent relationship. It's not just what they say, it's what they do, how they act. So that's going to be part of the conversation as well.
And it's something to really pay attention to. People can say anything. There's that saying about talk is cheap. And you just have to watch what our actions are. Do they back up what we say? And then what the other person's action are. Do they back up what they say? And so as we often start out with, oh, what are you wanting? Do you want a permanent relationship? Is that really what you want? And to go further for this first part of the conversation, what's your definition of a permanent relationship? I've heard quite the variety, and everybody thinks it's the same. And I'm going, oh no, we have such different dictionaries inside of ourselves with very different definitions. Like even in the regular Webster dictionary, they sometimes have more than one definition. Well, I think people have lots of definitions.
Yep. This is something that's going to be an interesting conversation because not only that framing, but also what we're going to talk about here. I know some people are going to have disagreements with because they don't have the same vernacular. So I know that this is a suggested conversation. This is not like we're going to say this is the rules, this is how it must be. Because frankly, everyone's different. There are some common threads, and that's what I'm going to speak to in this conversation. Is what are the common threads that most people, again, not all people, most people say and do when they want a permanent relationship? Because there are some pretty obvious signs ultimately.
For sure. So if you think you want to use the word permanent relationship, that typically the steps that get you there is you've decided you really, at some point, maybe you've met them or not, you want to be in a committed, monogamous, long-term, we're just going to use this broad term because some people, polyamorous, and there's lots of ways. They're just going to start out with, let's get basically 2 people together before you start including other people.
Indeed.
But that's what you want. And what that entails, because I'm on vacation and my niece and her family just left, but at one point there were 9 people in this house, and we really motor around really well with each other and don't get in each other's way, and food happens and dishes happen and clothes getting washed. And it's kind of remarkable because I said that to somebody the other day and they go, is there a lot of chaos? And I said, there really isn't. The way that we are together, this group, the other part of my family, not so much. This part of my family, very much. So what adjustments do you need to make when you're going to be in a house, or at least part of the time in a house with another person? Mm-hmm. So what are you willing to negotiate about? What are your absolutes? I can't live with somebody if they did this. I couldn't even around a lot of hours. I couldn't even go away for a weekend with somebody if they did this. I had a client, one of my very first clients, they'd spent a weekend together, but they decided to go on vacation. And she texts me from the vacation. She goes, I never thought I needed to ask to my list everyday bathing. He just didn't.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
it was an issue, and they had to talk about it because it hadn't come up. Because who thinks you should ask somebody, do you take a shower every day? Because he didn't. And sometimes,
Hmm.
you're just with somebody and they would shower together, but he didn't shower regularly on his own. So think about the things that's important to you that might seem kind of obtuse about asking somebody else about, but it might be something you'll need to bring up if you're going to start spending some time together. So,
Right.
because permanent to me means generally you're not going to be including other people in your home life, in your physical sexual life, in your regular day-to-day more intimate kind of conversations. That's what my definition, if I opened up mine that's inside of me, that permanent feels like.
Right.
What's yours, Barry?
Well, to speak to your example with your client, that's actually I do a chapter from my book about this. Somebody says that if you want to really discover if there's going to be a good chance for a long-term relationship, you need to go away together,
Yep.
because that's when all the stuff shows up. Because when you're just seeing each other in each other's homes, there's a relaxation and also, frankly, a level of unconsciousness that happens. You don't think about certain things, but when you go away together, yes, you discover, oh, they don't share every day. That's something you may not have realized before. So that example is so perfect because, frankly, I would suggest a lot of people get into a permanent relationship without doing the necessary um, due diligence or vetting beforehand.
Betting.
And
Betting's
we've
really important.
so and we're not doing it here because we've done it in previous episodes, but like little things we talked about this recently. I think about the toothpaste tube, about the
Uh-huh.
cap on, cap off type stuff. There are certain things that you want to discover and discuss at the precursive step before the permanent relationship. So that stuff, let's just presume we've already covered that because we did talk in other episodes.
Yeah. But we needed to touch on it a little bit.
Yeah, well, we're definitely going to bounce back to it. I know, but don't. But in terms of a major piece, that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about you've
Yeah.
gone that point, and you're now saying, okay, what is it you want? What is it people say and do when they want to be in a permanent relationship?
Yeah.
When they're past the point of going, oh, well, they have that foible, that quirk, that unusual thing.
And it seems to be okay enough. I mean, that's the point you get to, because as you said about vacation, there were people that after vacation, I'm like, oh, I can't do this long term. And there were people after vacation, I'm like, oh, yeah, we traveled really well together. And our things that we have that are maybe a little different meshed, and the things that we didn't have, that it was wonderful at the end. It was like, oh, that was okay. We were okay enough. So you've gotten to be okay enough, and maybe there's some fabulous things and things you're like, wow, you want to start building a future. So this is the conversations that it's important to start having, and some actions that you're going to start taking.
Indeed, and in fact, one of the things, just speaking of vacation for a second, because there's the thing about, well, not vacation, but traveling. Because the thing is, it's also clear to know what are the priorities and qualities you want to have with that person when you're in that permanent relationship, which is one of the things you want to say. It's like, is it something you like to do? Because I was thinking about it because a couple of friends of mine, married couple, 2 kids, they have, I want to say 3, maybe 4 different homes they live in around the world. Not like they're palatial places, but because one was raised in England, but is from Greece. The other one's American, but was raised in somewhere else. I don't remember exactly where it was. So they have these homes where they basically have family. So they're all over the place. And the kids, I mean, one's I think 9 or 10 now. The other one's maybe 2.5, 3. They are becoming so worldly in their understanding of the life, and so I mean, so it works for them. But the thing is, what I'm saying is, it's flying over.
It's an airplane.
Oh,
I
okay,
have an airplane.
I was like,
We don't
something in
even
my.
live near an airport, actually, but sorry.
That's okay.
Live
No,
video.
I didn't know what the sound was, so I was like, what was coming in? Anyway, getting back to the point. So the thing is that because these 2 people, and I knew them separately before, which I knew him before, I didn't know they had this synergy, this thing where they basically declared they wanted to be able to travel together because that's their lifestyle. Yes, they do a lot of work in different locations, a lot of it by Zoom, of course, but the fact that life supports that and they both thrive in that environment is so rare because most people, I would suggest, aren't the nomadic type, because that's what they are. Basically, they don't have a permanent home. They live a few months here, then a few months there, and that's based on their lifestyle. So, getting back to the topic, meaning that what they say on a permanent relationship, are you willing to declare for yourself in that um, arena of dating with that person you're with? So these are things you want to have with them to do. Travel the world, being
Yeah.
one of them, for example, or it could be starting a new business together. I mean, it's like, what are those things that you really know that you want in your hearts of hearts? Because I know for myself, it's like one things I know I want to do ultimately with the relationship I have is somebody's going to do my work, do this work with me. I don't have a separate closet, different sort of world sort of thing. That's not my style. So that to me is part of it. Now, she may not be like that. Again, as we'll see. But that's kind of what I'd like to think I'm creating another permanent relationship. So I'll be saying that in my conversations with anybody I'm looking at being in a permanent relationship with. So knowing what you want and what you really want to create is kind of core to this. What do you say to when you want a permanent relationship?
And I'm going to give an example too, just like yours. So after Tony died and I moved back to my condo, I had a whole bunch of boxes, and I'd gotten a lot of my boxes through the Nextdoor app. So I put my now still in really good shape boxes, and this couple shows up. And you know me, I got to talk to everybody about their relationships.
Of course.
They met online, and they'd been dating 6 months, and they had discovered after the first few dates, both of them loved to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them kind of hesitantly said, because they'd had negative feedback before, I'd really like to travel the United States in an RV. And the other was like, really? Me too. Then the twist came. The guy is a farrier, which means he takes care of horses' feet. And mostly he did horses that don't wear shoes. So he's not a horseshoer, but that's called barefoot, but they still have to have them trimmed and shot. So she's like, I love horses, but I've never been around horses. So she was going to sell her house, and the boxes were to put her things in storage, and he was going to rent out his house. And they had friends all over the United States, and he had clients that he'd now vetted for around the United States, and they were going to spend a number of years in this RV traveling around together. And both of them were like, I never thought I'd find somebody like this. I kept asking people, and we were like, you lost your mind. And they were such a perfect, which I could never do, I can't imagine, but they were such a perfect match for each other. You know, we keep saying there's a lid for every pot. You just have to keep looking. And they were perfect for each other in this very quirky way.
Yeah, that's the thing. And so that underscores the point again. It's like, you know, in a lot of ways, what I think we're saying at this point in the conversation is that we want to make sure that we're willing to declare for ourselves what we want with our prospective lifetime partner.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said lifetime, not permanent, just to be clear. That context of understanding is that when you're looking to be in a permanent relationship,
yeah.
I guess I want to say this point, because this is what's come up for me, is a lot of people don't think ahead. They sort of drift into, they fall into, they lean into, they settle down into a permanent relationship without any thoughts about what they should say to each other first to make sure they are in fact going to want to be in a long-term relationship with this person, or they want to be in a relationship with you. So what we're talking about here is it's important, if not vital, to declare what it is you really want, what you're looking for, and what you want to create with that person, because that's going to be a guideline to where you want to go. So do that.
And to know things are going to come up. You're going to change. They're going to change. It's just part of being a human being. We're not static at all. So one of the things I've talked about before that's really I teach and practice is to set up a regular, what's a business meeting about the health of your relationship. Is there anything that's come up for you? Is there anything that you need to talk about? Is there anything that you want to celebrate? Anything you need some adjustment about? Because if you do it every week, it doesn't get ahead of you. And you can get really resentful, both people, because they're not getting their needs met. But oh my gosh, I thought they already knew this. And what I've found too is we move through these phases and we're not always aware that we can be a little bit different in our different phases, in our beginning part of dating, in our highly sexual, oh my God, we can't keep our hands off each other. And then it kind of settles down to feeling more care and love and attachment. And then more of the day-to-day and how do you keep it spicy? So if you keep having this meeting on a really regular basis where both people go, really, I'm fine. I don't think there's anything. Okay, really? Because you know you've set up the means of being honest with each other. But then if there's something little that's come up, because it's going to keep coming up, you go, what do we need to do about it? Can we do something about it? Is it something you just have to live with? Is it what kind of adjustments can we make? And so I think that's essential if you're considering a permanent relationship, when set up some sort of regular routine, like why would we want to do that? And oh, that's so boring. And I say, well, set it up when you're in the best mood. You're not in the middle of a fight. Maybe you just had a great meal together, maybe not so much wine. And then you talk about, where are we today? How are things today? Is there something additional you need or want? Is there something I did that you didn't remember to tell me I did great about? That's kind of a fun conversation to have too. But that's such an important foundation when you're thinking about staying together on a permanent basis.
Yeah. Oh, it is. I mean, what we're really talking about here is how are you preparing for and how you're planning to participate in a long-term permanent relationship? Because again, many people don't. So this conversation with a lot of people is a wake-up call to say, you need to know what you want to say, or you should say, need to know what you're thinking so you can declare it and speak to it in the conversations that lead into that permanent relationship. And having the touch points of that state of the relationship conversation, so to speak, on a regular basis is such a smart strategy to have, because a lot of reasons relationships fail is because partners don't talk along the way, and you end up being so far down the road of no return about what was a a minuscule issue has become so detrimental down the road.
Yeah.
If you had a weekly, bi-weekly, whatever that was, meeting to sit and talk, whether it's over tea or coffee or wine, to discuss what relationship is, you maybe had nipped that in the bud and it wouldn't even go that far. How many divorces will be avoided if people actually have conversations every week? Just a thought.
I have talked to so many couples that when we really dig, it's often this one thing that happened that was blown out of proportion or misunderstood, or one of you had a trigger from your past relationship or your family of origin people, and it just piles on top of each other and escalates, and it's nobody's fault, especially if you didn't know that this was your thing and your trigger and the other person's blindsided, and then you have no tools to work with it. So that's one of the things when I work with couples I do. And since I've now spent vacation with 8 other people, I think you need to talk about family. How much time do you like spending with your family? And how much time do you want me to be included? And how comfortable and I am with that? And what kind of things do you all do together? That it's really interesting because they're all way more introverted than me. And I've learned it. But if I brought an extrovert into this, there'd have to be a whole bunch of conversations ahead of time about that. We go deep. My husband said, oh my God, they gave me a Myers-Briggs test before Thanksgiving dinner one year. So it's kind of a warning label about my very psychological based family, which I adore, but it's not for everybody. And so to balance, because you go, oh, I'd love for them to come. My family's really fun. Well, maybe I don't want to spend all that much time with their family. So to talk about what are the things that happen, how much do you need? There might be times you go, let's take separate vacations to go hang out with their families, and then we'll come back and talk about it. And if both of you are okay with that, great. But if you assume and have expectations that you haven't talked about, you are screwed, and not in a good way.
Right. Nice. I love the idea of getting Myers-Briggs before Thanksgiving dinner. That just cracks me up.
He always said that my sister-in-law made his head hot in a good way. It's a high compliment.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, the thing is, what you're saying is so powerful because you said one key thing in there is like, what are you like with your family, and do you want me to be part of that? I would like to think that every relationship that's growing and thriving is loving would include family visits once in a while, not all the time, but once in a while with both sides of the family, if there's any family left. But having understandings of what you're walking into, to warn your partner ahead of time what they may walk into with your own family, that's a kindness for sure.
The taboo subjects. I mean, really, isn't it nice to know?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I think another hot button is money.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to blend it? Who's going to pay for what? If your income is a big difference, do you settle on everybody pays a certain percentage? I mean, I had that conversation when I had my event planning company with wedding couples all the time who had never thought about it and never talked about it. I'm like, really? I think planning a wedding is a really good time to talk about how you're going to do your budgets and how you're going to plan for retirement and who's going to pay for what. Because it was a really fun thing to figure that out in the wedding planning. And so have the money conversation, like, oh, nobody wants to talk about money. It's worse later. It's so much worse later if you don't talk about it now. And then if you keep bringing it up, maybe you bring it up on a monthly basis, not every single meeting. There might be other things that you're having in your, what's the status of our relationship meeting, but once a month, at least quarterly, how are we doing with the finances? Because maybe something drastic has changed, positive or negative, and we need to adjust something. You can't just keep going along la-di-da if something's changed financially. Ooh.
Right. Yeah, and that's the part that also is, speaking of that sort of thing, there's so many different schools of thought about how you should either not mingle your money at all or mingle everything. And it's like, maybe find a middle ground. But having conversations about those things, I mean, we talked about this before, and I'm sure it's about in other shows about the primary qualifications of relationship communication, which include money, sex, relationship, politics,
Religion.
Religion, that was the other one. Yes, they come up. And so if you're not having those conversations now, before you're in that long-term relationship, here's a hint: start having them.
Right.
Yes. Let me just say those again for those who remember. So relationships is the key, but one also sex, money, politics, and religion are kind of the four big ones that, because we don't necessarily want to talk about them, we tend to avoid them.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know ahead of time what your voting particular preferences are, what you think of the government, if you think you're going to vote anyway, or what you think of the overarching system, what your beliefs are about spirituality and religion. Hopefully that comes up early in a relationship. I mean, for me, it does all the time, because I'm very clearly based in the spiritual viewpoint. So within the first 2 or 3 dates with somebody, I need to know what the spiritual values are, because it's like, that's a deal breaker for me. So those sort of things are important to have conversations about. And even to that idea, especially young enough, is family. A couple of friends of mine I know dearly, known for years, they got married because they both were clear they didn't want to have kids. They're like, no, I'm not going to have kids. Great. You don't want kids? Great. Let's get married. Sort of thing. They sort of had that conversation. 10 years into the relationship, she got pregnant. Their daughter is now mid-20s, is a full-time musician. She's a rock star. I mean, she's so fun. But even at like 2 or 3 years old, because we were in class together in our spiritual community, and this 2 and 3-year-old would be in the car when they came back from class, because they were both in the same class. So she got babysat at the church. And as they were driving home, like if they ever had anything that wasn't lining up, the little one would be guiding them. Like, like, can we pray now? Can we take the moment to breathe now? Like the 3-year-old. So they definitely called in a smart kid for themselves. But this is the thing, is like, yes, as you said earlier, it's like, best laid plans, things can change, definitely. But it's nice if you start on the same page. And it's funny because in this case, they both start on the same page with no kids, and now they have a daughter. So who knows what's going to happen? But the thing is, how do you handle it? How do you play with it? How do you live with those ideas?
And what I will say to add on to that is, if you have these regular meetings and you've brought up these tough, hard, that's what people say all the time, subjects, why do you want to talk about that? You've had a foundation. You've already talked it through that, yeah, now there's a left turn or a U-turn or full stop about something. You can now have a conversation about it. I might have mentioned my friends before that when they got married, first they were together for a long time, then they got married and had kids. One of them was an agnostic and one of them was an atheist, and they were very comfortable with that. And then quite a while into their marriage, he returned to his Christian Science roots. And she's like, oh, I mean, not only is this religion, this is religion with a capital R, with lots and lots of rules. And they had to talk about it, and had already had this foundation with other things, because they had agreed about religion in the beginning, like your friends had agreed about no kids. But they talked about so many other things and been open and honest about it, that he was very clear, this is something for me. I really need it. Don't require you to do it at all. You don't have to come to church. You don't have to stop going to the doctor. This is who I am and I need. And they got through it just fine, and they're still happily married. But because they had this foundation, they could have, like, all of a sudden you're pregnant, this big switch in what you thought was you had so in common, that now it's so different, but we can talk about it. We can still live with it. We're okay with the other person, especially when you say, well, maybe the child, you have to both get on board, but she didn't have to get on board with becoming his religion. But how they worked it out, saying, now we're both going to have a child in our life. How are we going to be okay with that? I mean, there's been marriages that have been split up over that.
Absolutely.
Or very permanent relationships, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is what we're talking about here. It really is, even someone says, what men and women say when they want a permanent relationship, It's also what they say is they don't end up with a broken relationship. Permanent relationship is implying that it doesn't end early and for some reason it wasn't planned ahead. So what we're talking about here is the conversations you have. Partly what we're talking about is the conversations you have before you commit to that long-term relationship, before the wedding bells, before that ever moving in together, whatever that is for you. Because there are certain times I know in my past relationships where one person we moved in together, and it wasn't we together a few months, we started noticing things were not lining up the way we thought they were. And I would suspect at least half, I won't say all of them, just scanning through, this is a long time ago now, my memories, but she was looking at going towards getting engaged and I wasn't, which is one of the problems. But also there were things showing up in the relationship which we could have talked about earlier and we didn't. So that for me is a absolute kind of thing to say. So it's good to have this conversation early.
Yeah, we're living proof of not doing it that way and now figuring out how to do it the other way, huh, Barry?
Yep.
So we'll talk about more about how to do it in the right way when we come back after our break.
We do indeed.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
And we're back with Let's Talk About Dating with Christine and Barry. And today we're talking about what are the top things that men and women say when they want a permanent relationship. And Barry was giving a couple of examples. Had you finished?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking back at other relationships I've had, and yes, from personal experience, I'm not just talking about clients here.
Yeah,
definitely had the reality and recognition of the mistakes, or I should say the errors in approach, where I didn't have those conversations beforehand. So I'm very passionate. I'm very adamant about it's important to have the conversations before you move in together and have that permanent relationship, because making the commitment is like basically you drive without turning the engine on. It's like, you can't go anywhere in some ways. Or, there's a joke in my business about, you should be ready, aim, fire. For most people, it's ready, fire, and aim. Fire first, then you aim. It's like in relationship, people do that. They jump into a long-term relationship, permanent relationship, without realizing what they're walking into until it's too late. And they go, oh, now what have I done? Hence divorce, breakups, domestic issues, all sorts of challenging like that. So this is a useful piece of information to take with you, just to be clear.
So important. Yeah, I've talked to people that they sold their house and completely relocated to another state. And then it's like, oh, we should have talked about this part ahead of time. And Absolutely. It's nice because there are a lot of options. I mentioned that I have a neighbor, must be 6 years now, that she and the guy that she's been with, decided they only wanted to be with each other and forever. They're both widowed, and yet it didn't feel as permanent. And sometimes she would get flirted with, when she was just out on her own. So he gave her an engagement ring, which made them both feel the extra commitment. And, you walk around with a ring on, and generally people know that you've already committed to somebody.
Yeah.
And so to do that sometimes is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes is it important if you want to enter a permanent relationship? Do you need not marriage, but a commitment ceremony? You need to discuss that with the other person, because how do they feel about that? Is that something that they'd be open to? They don't care either way, or they're adverse to it. I mean, that's really important.
Yeah, I like the idea of that, because I think nowadays there's less people getting married early like there used to be. So having something that really matches into that. Thank you, Bonnie, for that comment. Thank you,
Yeah, great advice. Thank you. If you're afraid to ask those uncomfortable questions, that's not good, right? You second that we're telling people should ask those uncomfortable questions. Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to get back to the point I was attempting to make,
Rose interrupted you again.
It's like it happens all the time. See, that's the thing I've learned to do. Is not be reactive, but to be fluid with that and be okay with it.
How adult.
But that's the thing. As I was saying, like, your marriages are, I think, less automatic as they used to be. Modern couples tend to do things. So to have a commitment ceremony, have something in place of that, raising the bar, so to speak, of valuing what you're choosing. Because again, as I said earlier, sometimes people move in without realizing what's at stake, what's going to happen, what's going to show up after you've moved in together and become permanent in a relationship. To have a ceremonial format, like you said, like a commitment ceremony, something ceremonial where you both say this is real. Maybe it's something simple like, you do some sort of like swapping the keys with a prayer or something. It could be something that simple, but it could be something more serious. Having your friends gather around, having something where you do something in nature, where you do some sort of ceremonial cleansing, or using some sort of like Palo Santo or sage or some other various things. Doing something that you both agree to and you both want to have, that underscores and also highlights the commitment you're making, that permanence you're choosing, is a wise step on the journey. Because again, asking the questions up front, to clarifying and verifying the values you carry in those areas we talked about, but also then making a physical move to make the choice evident, clear, and sacred are such gifts you can give each other and yourself, to then raise the standards so that this relationship you're choosing into and you're making permanent isn't just something you just sign off like you sign off on a bill without thinking about it. It's something that you really take into heart and you go, this is what I'm choosing for me, for her, for us.
Yeah, because you really are creating a third entity, the relationship together between these two people.
Yes.
And there's a number of people that I've talked to, heavily more on the women, but some men, they need a commitment ceremony of some sort. They need something before they give their heart, before they give their body. Oftentimes it has some religion. Sorry, another plane. I
know what it is. Yeah.
For the whole week I've been here, I haven't heard a plane. That sometimes it's religious, and sometimes it's just, I want to feel you make a commitment to me. I want to hear you say some sort of words. I want we give each other a token, whatever that is. Or I was thinking, since I'm surrounded by all these trees, you could plant a tree together that's now symbolizing your relationship. And to do something that says, we've said some sort of words about, I only want to be with you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Just two of you, and you don't have to have any other people around. You could have a couple of friends, and that way you're satisfying that. Because if you have this need, you can't deny it. And then I have a number of people, it's a smaller number now of people over 50, they want a marriage. They're fine going to City Hall, they're fine with a couple of friends, they don't have to have a big hoopla party. They want a piece of paper. They want a piece of paper that registers them with the state and ultimately the government, that says, we're getting married and we're making this commitment to each other. And then that's a whole nother set of circumstances as far as finances are concerned. If you do get officially married, you have to be very clear with, I said, talk to legal people, ask legal people, You need legal people, whether it's somebody who works for both of you or somebody separate, because then you don't have to ever think about it again. Because if it comes up in the middle and you haven't thought about it, one person gets sick or dies, or both, and you just don't want to even think about it. So now when you're all happy and in love, that's when you think about it. And please make some sort of really great permanent arrangements. And because we're all going to admit we're over 50, what's your medical directive? You need, it's not romantic at all, I'm so sorry, but I think you need to talk about what your medical directive is, what your wishes are, how much effort do you want people to make if you have something happen to you catastrophic, and who's in charge. Because some spouses have said, I can't do it. I can't do it. And they'll appoint somebody else. But if you don't talk about it, then people are going to be asking the spouse person who already knew before they lost you, they're going to be upset. And now they're devastated and grieving. So sorry, it's not the fun conversation to have, but how do you not have that if you're thinking about being together for the rest of one or both of you's lives? Really?
It's that's such a key thing. I mean, it's so funny. I mean, I'm looking at, like, I'm on various different things I sign online about who's your emergency contact. I'm like, I don't have anybody. I mean, that's as simple as that. Sounds so simplistic. Oh, emergency contact, great, somebody's phone number. But the truth is, when looking at a committed relationship, there's a deeper thing, and that relationship itself between the two of you has both of your input. And if there's something that's going to upset that boat of what's the couple relationship is, you want to have the opportunity to plan ahead, not because it's the worst case scenario, but just a plan so you know that it's covered. So if anything does happen, you're not stuck up a creek without a paddle, so to speak. You do have recourse. So yes, things like hospital stays, the money divisions, stuff that you work on the house. If there's a disaster or something else, what do you do about things? How do you set things up so that you don't get shortchanged or cast aside by the unfortunate lack of planning? So yeah, it's good idea to have these things in place.
Yes. I mean, I knew of a couple, they weren't a client of mine, that they were traveling. They'd been together for 18 years. He fell catastrophically, was in a coma. She couldn't even go in his room because there was nothing legal. They had nothing legal. They'd never even done it, so they couldn't even have it faxed to them. They had to get one of the kids on the phone to help with this, who was not prepared or equipped at all. And she was but it shocked the whole single group that we all knew them and said, oh, we're so getting something out there now, because they just assumed, they'd already felt, they talked about it. What would you do? What would you do? And he's fine, thank goodness. But it was touch and go for a long time. And she couldn't even go in his room and hold his hand. They couldn't tell her one thing that was wrong. And they wanted to, but the whole HEPA thing, if you have not signed in writing, this person's allowed, no, you can do nothing.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
This is why it sounds so simplistic, but it's like you want to have these things in place because you don't know what's going to happen. Ideally, it's going to be idyllic and loving and wonderful and everything's fine, loving ever after. Yeah. But to be blunt, crap happens, shit happens, stuff happens.
Sure does.
So being prepared. As I say, it's like, you're being, was it forewarned is forearmed, they say. And that's the thing, is if you know that you want to be in this relationship with this person and you value what you have together, you want to make sure that you value that if anything happens, it doesn't destroy the relationship. Yeah. Preparation is a wise choice. It's worth preparing.
It really is. It really is. And the thing is that's so incredible often is the more prepared you are, the less seems it happens. I mean, that's the part that's pretty remarkable. That you could sleep better at night and you could know what a gracious gift that you've given me, that you've taken care of me. I know how I can take care of you. We've had it all. We've talked about it. Do you need to revisit it every year? Sure, probably. That's what I tell people. Once a year, like you get a physical checkup, go get your financial, legal stuff checked up too. It could be there's no change, but you don't know. Is somebody in your family gotten married or somebody else died? I mean, you might need to change stuff. It took me a while to go, I think I need to change my stuff now that my husband died. I mean, it was really not something you think of right away. And if anything happened, I'm like, there's nobody that's written down that they're supposed to do something about me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it works. So that's the thing is, I mean, it's funny. We cover quite a bit. And I'm just realizing we just come to this point of being such an important piece. But I'm realizing how much we talked about how little of it is what people think about.
I know.
This whole, because a lot of people, unfortunately, and I was one of them, I did it for myself too, as I said earlier, is we look at our relationships without thinking about the impact it has on our lives and those around us. And if we really do want to have, and we are getting into a relationship which may be more permanent, more long-term, more committed, so to speak, then notice what that does to change your life and the life of those around you, because you'll notice things you didn't notice before, both the good things and the things you need to prepare for. And the things I want to say is that, yes, we're both proactive and both cheerleaders for this as well. Is that we both definitely encourage people to have good, long-term, happy, healthy relationships, but also be smart. Do the right thing as well. Yes.
And we've really suggested a lot of things you might not have thought about, but also it's kind of interesting to talk to other couples that have been together for a long time and say, well, what sorts of things have come up for you? What sort of things are you prepared? Oh, I never thought about that. Oh, we did this. I never thought about that. I mean, that might be an interesting conversation to have over dinner with your friends. We just want to have this 10-minute conversation with you. This is what we've been thinking about. What have you been proactive about? And then, go back to your other conversation, but at least go, oh gosh, we probably should think about that and do something about that now that we're deciding to be permanently together.
Exactly. So there's lots to do here, but it's worth it.
Checklist, right? People could really write down a lot of, this is the one where people could really write down a lot from this episode, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. But if you want a reminder, you could call either one of us. You could set up a chat with us, and we would be happy to go over it all with you and whoever your to-be permanent honey bunny is.
Mm-hmm.
I call the people here honey bunny a lot, so.
I can tell.
Yeah, I adore the people I've spent the week with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very lucky, so lucky. If you would like to reach me, one of the good ways is to go to my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com, and click on What's Holding You Back from Love. And then you can schedule a complimentary conversation with me. It gives you access to my calendar. You can also sign up for my newsletter, and then every week you'll get a replay of this and maybe some other tidbits that I'll send out to you. You can also send me a direct email to Christine@theperfectcatch.com. And you can reach me on my social media platforms of Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Pinterest at both Christine Baumgartner and also The Perfect Catch. And then on Instagram, it's Coach Christine Baumgartner, and on YouTube, it's at Coach Christine Baumgartner.
Wow. Nicely done.
Take it away, Barry.
That's so much easier, thankfully.
I know.
So if you're in a place where you want to reach out for more support, more help from me, my website is my name, which is easy, which is barryselby.com. On the homepage there, you can click on the bottom and join my email list straight away, where again, like Christine, you get an email with a replay of this show, plus other tips, guidance, and resource you can get from me. At the top of the homepage, there's also a link to sign up for a mini session with me, so you can test drive my skills and see where you are and get some clear guidance on your next steps. So it's worth investing in that. So that says, take the next step. It's basically the top of the screen. You can see right there. You can also drop me an email. My email address is barry@barryselby.com. Same thing as well. And on social media, you can find me on all the platforms except Instagram at Barry Selby. So Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube especially, Clubhouse, and now on Threads, because Threads is up as a new app. So it competes with Twitter. Yeah, Threads, even know about one.
You're so cutting edge, Barry.
LinkedIn. And then on Instagram, actually, no, take it back. Threads is different. I forgot that. Yes, because I'm on Instagram as the real Barry Selby, and Threads because it was built by Instagram has the same account information. So I'm the real Barry Selby on both Instagram and the Threads. So the real Barry Selby there, and there's Barry Selby everywhere else, and that should cover it.
And you can see us live every week here on Thursdays at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, and all the other times in between. We'd love for you to watch live. You're welcome, as Bonnie did, to put in comments or ask us questions. And then when you see if you're watching this on a replay, please tell us what you thought, subscribe, like, send us any questions you have or any subjects you'd like us to cover in the future. And we're on all the platforms, including Roku and Spotify and Apple.
and on Google and on Amazon as well. We're also on the audio platform. So the thing is, you can watch us live on Thursdays, but you can watch us in archive and listen to us on the road on any platform, on your podcast platforms too, because we like to share a message everywhere.
We're very portable. You can take us anywhere you go.
Exactly.
So we will see you next week with a wonderful, another scintillating, spicy subject.
Indeed, we will. See you then. Take care.
Bye for now.
Bye.